Do you feel like you were, don't like, quote unquote, in your words, mad?
Yeah. Somebody said you've got to be mad to be sane. You know,
that feels like it's overcomplicated, Rufus. That was not the question. I'm Iman Amrani and I'm a journalist at The Guardian, and I do this series called Modern Masculinity. In the past year, I've tried to take a little bit of an angle looking at mental health specifically. I think that it's easier to have conversations about things like depression or anxiety, for example, rather than some more intimidating diagnoses such as schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder. I've decided to speak to some men who have had these experiences specifically, been through the system, taken medication. Next week we'll be speaking to a writer called Derek who was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. But this week I'm going to be speaking to Chris from Bradford.
I was mad with the system, I was mad with what they'd done to me. I should have been doing things I'm doing now in my early 20s. I was never given the chance.
Now, before speaking to Chris, I wanted to speak to Rufus, who is a clinical psychologist who himself had a psychotic episode when he was a teenager. I wanted to speak to him a little bit about what his feelings and thoughts are around mental health and what approach he thinks would be healthiest moving forwards. Somebody said to me, you've got to speak to Rufus. Rufus is in the system, but he's thinking about things slightly differently.
Right.
And I also was told that you yourself had kind of been on a journey.
Yeah, I'm a bit obsessed.
Okay, yeah, that's another way of putting it, okay.
The positive way of talking about this, I'm passionate, I'm passionate about people and their potential. And that comes from my own experience, not only of being kind of crazy, but also the people I met in hospital, seeing their humanity, seeing that they weren't that different to you or I. And I kind of came along that continuum, so I was quite mad, and I came out of that and appeared quite sane.
Are we allowed to say mad? I can't say mad. Can I say mad?
Well, I guess it's how you say things as well, isn't it? Yeah. You can speak about it for yourself. I mean, I thought I was a spy, and I was actually not a spy.
Okay, all right.
And I thought I had a special hotline to God. So I was out there. I quite like the old words like madness because they kind of go with maddening. So maddening used to be a term we would use, for life. So it recognises the link between life events and mental health, and that sometimes gets obscured by scientific kind of pseudoscience that sort of says, oh, it's all in the brain.
One of the things that is really kind of fascinating to me is this debate of biology and then it's kind of like biology and experience.
Psychosis is in the eye of the beholder to some extent. So if somebody believes they're guided by the angel Gabriel and then you find they've got a trauma history and that explains why they might want to escape this world, say the angel Gabriel's helping them escape this world to heaven, you start to see that although it seems quite out of touch with reality, it's actually quite linked to reality. The person's been through a trauma history and they might need help with that. My fear is that we still focus on the problem and we don't look at that deeper understanding of it and try and help people with that.
Yeah.
The meaning of it. I always think it's meaningful.
Do you think that there are things that affect men who suffer from issues of mental health that maybe as a society we aren't? I mean, we've talked about strong emotions, which women and men can both have. So that's one thing is listening and talking, but what about when that doesn't work? Or what about if men don't want to do that?
Yeah, there probably is a danger in therapies that we emphasize too much on those feminine skills of relating and talking. And the middle class approach is it's all very cognitive. We talk about things and we learn how to rationally problem solve. But I actually think it's visceral, the emotional problems. We need to work with the body in different ways. And I'm a fan of things like yoga and meditation, but a lot of working class men, they're not, maybe won't be, yoga's that's for women, So we might need to work with martial arts. So there's something about using the body more, going for walks.
Which I guess also you make me think about the medication and how I think on some medication it might be hard to do those other things and that sometimes they could work against each other.
Medication is a tool. It's one part of the puzzle, and some people find it helpful, but we use it in a heavy-handed way, I think, often.
So a lot of what Rufus was saying was really, really interesting to me, and I wanted to speak to somebody who had lived experience of the system. And Rufus worked with a guy called Chris, who lives in Bradford, to bring down the level of medication that he was on. Chris, age 7, had a fall, which resulted in a head injury, which may be linked to his mental health issues. He also struggled a lot at school growing up, and when he was around 20, he was suffering with issues to do with alcoholism and was convicted of a GBH offence. All of these things kind of factor into his story, and once he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, he was put on quite a lot of medication, which he feels really impacted on the quality of life that he was able to have. The first time you took antipsychotic medication, you were 20 years old, right? Yeah. And there's a lot of, it sounds like there's a lot of like contributing factors and things that were going on at the time.
I was definitely unstable, I know that.
And when you took that medication, did you know much about what antipsychotic drugs were?
They told me it would make me feel better.
Okay.
They gave me it, and it was that strong. They gave me it at tea time. I couldn't even make it up the stairs. I remember falling asleep at the bottom of the stairs in the corridor.
As a result of taking the drugs that they'd given you. So you've been taking, how long have you been taking medication in your life?
I took the antipsychotic drugs for 25 years until I started reducing it when I was about 43 with the good help of this man Rufus.
Okay.
That's when I was living in supported housing. That's when the doctor says I was doing okay.
How old were you there?
30, 33. Rufus came to see me, and he was referred to me by the psychiatrist who were constantly giving me the antipsychotic medication. And she told me if I came off the medication, I would spend the rest of my life back in hospital.
Chris was living in supported accommodation.
Yes.
You were very angry at how you were being treated by the staff. You felt they treated you as a second-rate citizen.
I was mad with the system. I was mad with what they'd done to me. Sometimes I'd shout, sometimes I'd swear. And Rufus listened.
Did you feel like you hadn't been listened to before then?
Why would they want to listen to me? Why would they want to listen to somebody who had no education, come from a working class background? They're doctors. They didn't want to listen. That was the problem I had.
I mean, just looking at your notes, they thought you had this problem called schizophrenia from a young age. They didn't link it to your life problems. They just thought, so we have to permanently stop that with lifelong medication.
Yeah, but they didn't want to know, Rufus. They were told.
Schizophrenia is seen as this kind of life-debilitating illness. And so once they gave you that diagnosis, they assumed that was the cause of your problems and that the only thing they could do is keep you medicated, rather than see you as somebody who'd had a brain injury at 7, had a lot of school stress, a lot of confidence issues, turned to drinking. Rather than understand it as a reasonable reaction to difficult life events, they saw you as somebody who was genetically prone to being mad and needed to be kept medicated.
But why would they think you're going to get better treating somebody like that? I should have been doing things I'm doing now in my early 20s. I was never given the chance.
So like looking now and looking forwards, what do you want to do with the rest of your life?
I like to be content. I like an understanding that it wasn't just me who couldn't get better. I'm a lot older now, and I can do more things. I think I've done the 12 half marathons there. I've done.
Yeah, you've got all these. You brought them out and like.
People might think, it's hard, to do something, but at least give them a chance. That's what I like to say. People weren't willing to give me a chance for many years, but they were wrong.
Yeah.
I think they were wrong anyway.
Well, why do you think it is that people like Chris, I don't think it's an isolated case, I don't think he's an anomaly, but why do you think we don't see people like Chris usually when we're talking about mental health?
Well, we don't see people from poor working class backgrounds as much anyway in the media. So, we'll have Stephen Fry talking about mental health, We all get tempted to try and control our moods with substances. If I take this, it'll make me feel better. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes you feel worse. And I think we need to listen more to people like Chris when it's not helping, and be a bit more adventurous. But that means us all coming together and working more collectively, more collaboratively, really. Because I think the doctors feel like they're out there in the front line, and if they get it wrong, they'll be in the news headlines. You know, they'll be blamed by the coroner and the news reporter.
Do you know what's I can't do a single interview without somebody being like, journalists, the media. If we make a sweeping generalisation that it is maybe harder for men to talk about some things, feelings or things that have happened to them or whatever than women, then there's a really interesting thing in there about how you can best serve men, or like how men are treated a bit differently. Because, say for example, you're frustrated or you're angry and you demonstrate that, then you might be a very unsympathetic character for people, and that might be part of what makes things difficult for people like Chris.
We're uncomfortable with strong emotion. I mean, I've introduced boxing into the psychiatric wards where I work, and people are buying into it several years down the line. Nurses are doing it and wanting more training in it. So we're working with that anger rather than trying to just suppress it. And they're recognising that we're on the male ward and there are lots of angry men, and they're actually getting relief from doing it. And it's not making them go around and hit people. It's creating a space for that, the warrior archetype.
Do you feel like you were, quote unquote, in your words, don't like, quote unquote, in your words, mad?
Yeah.
And that now you are not mad?
Ooh. Somebody said you've got to be mad to be sane. You know,
that feels like it's overcomplicated, Rufus. That was not the question. You just took it like totally left. But do you know what I mean? Do you feel like you are different? Do you feel like
I feel like I can navigate society, and I couldn't navigate society then. That's what I want to help teach people, is how do you navigate society? Some people might hear voices, it's okay, if you can navigate society, that's fine. But if you find you can't navigate with your inner experiences, so it's not what you experience, but how you navigate, and whether you can find meaning and meaningful relationships in that.
When we're talking about mental health, we're not just talking about celebrities talking about their experiences, and a lot of the stuff that we see on TV and in these campaigns isn't necessarily what people are going through. A lot of these things are uncomfortable to talk about, they're contentious, people have different opinions, but we have to be able to sit down and listen to people and to be able to see them as humans. And I think that's something that Rufus does in his work, which is really, really important. So next week we'll be speaking to Derek. Derek is a very, very talented writer, and he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And so we'll be talking to him about his experience of the system, which decades after Chris is a very different one.
Because the psychologist, when he first came in and saw me, he was just like, I've been doing this for about 25 years and you're the first black man I've ever seen come through here with self-harm scars on your arms. And I was like, well, okay, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. They're just not coming through here.
I've been told not to say like, comment and subscribe because that sounds dated and corny, and I'm more than happy to not say that. But if you want to subscribe, like and comment, you could do that. You're laughing at that. That's a good one, isn't it? I came up with that just now.